Welcome to the OnScript Podcast, your home for world-class conversations on scripture and theology, where you get to meet some of the best in the field. Visit us at onscript.study. Say hello on Twitter at OnScript Podcast and stop by our Facebook page at facebook.com/OnScript.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the OnScript Podcast. This is Matt Lynch coming to you from Regent College in Vancouver. This is a really fun episode you're about to listen to, and we have a surprise guest partway through, so keep listening to find out who that is. If you're a longtime listener to OnScript, you might have your suspicions about who that might be, but otherwise, this is a really fun conversation with Dru about his book, Understanding Biblical Law. Thanks so much to all of you who share the word about OnScript. You know, we're coming up against Canadian and American Thanksgiving soon, so please, use those gatherings as an occasion to share the word about OnScript with friends and relatives over a meal. There's nothing quite like saying, "Hey, could you pass the OnScript?" Oh, I meant potatoes, and then that leads to conversations and allows people to find out about us. So thanks for listening and enjoy the episode. Welcome, everyone. Our guest today is none other than Dru Johnson, who's well known to listeners of the podcast from a bygone era. Just kidding, Dru. Current co-host of the OnScript Podcast. He is the Templeton Senior Research Fellow at Wycliffe Hall in Oxford, adjunct professor of religion at Hope College in Holland, Michigan, and he's the director of the Abrahamic Theistic Origins Project, the director of the Center for Hebraic Thought, the editor of the Biblical Mind, host of the Biblical Mind podcast, and co-host of the OnScript Podcast. So, Dru, how do you balance all of that?
Oh, I just neglect them all, equally.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So mediocrity is the key to my success.
No favoritism.
Yeah.
He's written a bunch of books, which I won't rattle off here, but you can see them listed in his bio on his website or on OnScript's website. Before becoming a scholar, he was a high school dropout, skinhead, punk rock drummer, combat veteran, IT supervisor, and pastor, all things that he hopes none of his children would ever become. Dru, does that still hold?
I've got one daughter considering seminary.
And anyone considering punk rock drummer?
No, none of them have any useful skills.
All right. Well, welcome to your own podcast. So a lot of Dru's work, just for listeners, it has to do with, I'd be curious if you think I'm summarizing you well, attaining a kind of first-person viewer experience of biblical thought, sort of insider's understanding, and not just learning about the meaning of biblical texts, but learning to think with and like them. Is that fair?
Yes. As a description, I'm a little hesitant. I don't want to get inside their heads. I want to be apprenticed under more.
Yeah.
I want them over my shoulder pointing things out to me. Rather,
you're getting technical.
Yeah. Sorry.
All right. So the topic today then pertains to that, because we're going to be discussing biblical law and Dru's book, Understanding Biblical Law, Skills for Thinking with and Through Torah, published by a Baker Academic in 2025. So, Dru, first question. We're going to start with the speed round.
Oh, wow.
Okay. You didn't expect that, did you?
No, I didn't.
Normally it's in the middle. How many days in a row is it okay to go without showering?
Oh, depends on where you live. That's a good question. For me, third day, I have to rise and take a shower. So I went to boot camp in July and August in San Antonio, Texas.
Oh, man.
And we figured out it's a lot of work to clean the showers and the latrine. And so our squad leaders in the boot camp said, "Hey, let's just not take showers. We'll just go the rest of boot camp without taking showers. We'll stink, but that's okay." And I think something like 4 or 5 days into it, our drill sergeant was standing out on the open pad outside and downwind of us, and he
had some words for you.
He just said, "Go get in the showers right now. You guys smell disgusting." So,
and did you get punished for that?
Yeah. I mean, you get punished for it. All mixes in. Punishment.
Right. Okay.
What's that mean? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. How many days in a row can you wear the same pair of pants? We're talking about domestic life, so not boot camp.
Yeah.
Like
jeans?
in the North American sense of the word pants, by the way.
Yeah. I didn't even think of that. Yeah, I think 2 weeks is completely acceptable.
2 weeks. I like that.
Me myself. It's one thing I appreciate about British culture is it's like not a big deal to have a small rotating collection of clothes.
Right. Yeah. The thing is, people don't always know if it's the same pair.
Totally. When I get a noticeable stain, like an identifiable stain, that's when I'm like,
right.
Plan sunk.
Yeah. Okay. You have to choose one of the following. Which would it be? Okay. So you have to choose one. First one, you have to sing loudly the name of each colleague you see in the morning. Let's say between 9 and 11 a.m. You have to sing their name without explanation. You can't justify it. Or you have to bark like a dog at your neighbor each morning, again, without explanation. Which would you choose?
I think my colleagues here would actually like it if I sang without explanation. They'd probably find it enjoyable. And my neighbor would probably shoot me if I barked at him too many times. So he does not mess around.
Are you in the Midwest right now? Are you in Hope or in
I'm in Michigan. They call it the Midwest, but it's not the Midwest.
Well, I was going to ask, like, since you're now living in the erroneously named Midwest, after having lived in New York City, what's one stereotype about the Midwest that needs to die?
Oh, I think,
or does it live up to all of them? I don't know.
Well, I think I don't know if it's a stereotype that the niceness on the street is superficial. At least in West Michigan, as they say here, I think people actually are. It does seem like the culture is just bent towards niceness, so it's not fake. It's just kind of like, yeah, we're just
genuinely nice.
Yeah, genuinely like saying, "Hey, how's it going?" And there's no motive behind it. Which the first 6 months we were here, I'm like, "What's your angle? Like, why do you care what I'm doing this weekend?"
Great. All right, let's talk about your book. This is a different kind of book than normal academic works, since you have like the scholarly stuff, which is very accessible, but you also weave into that a fictional account to help fill out the picture for people, and again to help them, as your title suggests, think with and through Torah. So that I found that really helpful. And what inspired that? How'd you come up with that idea?
I'm glad you found it helpful. It was the hardest part to write of the book because nobody tells you how hard.
I kept wanting to know what would happen. It genuinely pulled me along. It was effective.
So you might have been my target audience. There's nobody else who will care. But as I was writing it, essentially every chapter I was hitting different aspects of biblical law. And I found myself starting every chapter with, okay, well, here's how we think about this in the modern world, this aspect of law. And that's not helpful at all. That won't help you understand what's going on in biblical law. So after like the third chapter of doing that, I thought, well, nobody's going to want to read a book where all they say is, you think this wrong. Like it just gets old. And so I thought, how can I construct a positive engagement with law that will at the same time help people understand that their ideas about law really are in some ways very estranged from what's going on. And they're just foreign to what's going on in the biblical law. And so I asked Baker, and they said, oh yeah, scholars always ask to do this. It's so funny. Like you get a quick insight into the publishing industry. They're like, oh yeah, people always ask to do this. And it's usually horrible. So we just say no on principle. And so I said, okay, how about I just mock up a few chapters of a story and you tell me whether it's, swing and a miss or something else. So I mocked up, a few chapters and sent them to the editor, and she goes, yeah, we can work this into something usable. And so they let me do it, and they gave me some great feedback. They gave me a fiction editor who was completely useless to me because they wanted me to turn it into an entire fictional novel kind of thing.
Oh, they got excited about.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, I was like, no, this is a utilitarian story. It's meant to serve this function within the book. It's not meant to be a freestanding, story. So most of their advice I could not actually put into play because it would have lengthened the story significantly.
Yeah, I thought it was just the perfect length, and actually gave coherence to the whole book, and just helps you get inside the legal world of ancient Israel without a heavy-handed feel. It's not like, your character is going to the archives and reading ancient laws, like basically just being a scholar or something like that. So it's really, really well done. So you talked about like you kept hitting against those differences between modern and ancient law. So what are some of the major differences that you would want to highlight between biblical law as we see it today and some of the ancient laws? Like, I'll read a quote from you from page 27.
Okay. Yeah, what did I say?
Here's what you think, Dru.
Okay.
Before my own studies in law, I brought a reductionistic statutory approach to the topic in which laws are written, binding, and either followed or broken by citizens.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got like the Torah given by God to Moses and the people on Sinai, written down, etched in stone, some of it, and it seems like it functions that way.
Yeah, I think a lot of us, and you tell me if this is true of you, you teach the legal portions of Scripture, and over time, you just get this like, the questions students ask where you're constantly going, that's probably not what's going on here, or that's not really what this is getting at. And you get the sense that something doesn't fit with our legal reasoning and the way our legal thinking today. And then eventually, I read some of Jonathan Burnside, I think was the first guy I ran into. We had him out to Jerusalem for a conference, and some of his quips his casual comments blew my mind about the law. And then I think that this would also be one of the major, I think this is the major hurdle for people understanding what's going on in biblical law, better rather than worse, would be we just have this legal, statutory, legislative mind frame, if I can combine two words there, where a law is legislated, it's kind of articulated in a very specific type of language and framework, and then you either do it or you don't. And if you don't do it, you can be penalized or arrested and detained or bond, or fined in various ways. And that's just how we think about law. And most of us learn American laws by breaking them or knowing somebody who got arrested for it. Like the number of times when I've told my kids, hey, you can get arrested for that. And they're like, what? Why? And then you have to explain to them, right? And I think that makes the point. There's no class on law. I mean, think about high school should have a whole class on like laws that you could accidentally break, right? Because it's really unclear to us. Versus the law, which functions as we say, the word Torah is more like instruction, and it does have a keep. So you'll notice that they use the metaphor to keep the law. You must keep this law, keep these words, these statutes of mine. But keep their shamar, which has this whole other connotative range of shepherding, tending, cultivating, fostering. So I always say in the biblical law, you keep it like you keep a garden or like you keep sheep. Where in our law today, you keep it in the sense of you don't break it. It's a very inflexible, rigid structure that, it's a piece of glass that you can't break. And if you break it, then you're penalized. So just saying that it's instruction that you foster, that alone, if you take that on board and take it seriously, it's going to completely reorient your perspective. Now, I should also say it does have statutes that you can break or keep in our sense of the law as well. So those aren't entirely absent, but it's not the kind of the framework that funnels our legal reasoning there. So I think if I'm the guess, that's probably the biggest one that people run into as a problem.
Yeah, and so there are all kinds of sort of downstream implications of that shift in thinking. If you move away from a statutory understanding of the main framework of the law, what would you say are some of the shifts then that need to happen in the way that you're reading, let's say Exodus 21 to 23, or the latter part of Leviticus, or middle of Deuteronomy? Or maybe like accompanying that question would be like, what are these laws doing then, if not telling you what you can't do?
Yeah, so if they are instruction and they're trying to shape our thinking and also our adjudication. Like I think at the end of the day, what I portray in the fiction is village elders actually trying to hammer out what do they do in this situation. So if it's trying to shape the way you think and make decisions and kind of run the family unit and above, then the question you're asking in any given law is, what is this trying to teach me, or what kind of thing is it trying to form me into? So it has this formative edge. It's trying to get me to think about a particular angle on what it's talking about. And I never tire of talking about the eye for an eye in Exodus 21, where it takes a very different angle on lex talionis than the rest of the ancient Near East. Even though it's not afraid to use the same principle, there's a very, very open principle of parity going on there, but it angles into it to teach a very unexpected party, right? It's like you don't expect it to be teaching a slave owner not to touch their slave's body. Like that's a hands-off situation. So when you take it as teaching, then you have to ask a different series of questions, which is, and sometimes gives you radically different inroads into what the law is trying to do. And towards the end of the book, I give the example of the testicle grabbing, cheat weights, and the laws, the rule about Amalek, that Amalek must be destroyed. Things that just don't, like if you just look at them as statutes, what are you going to say connects these things statutorily? I mean, there's nothing going on there. But if you see it as teaching, it becomes pretty clear that it's actually using very extreme and mild examples to show care for the vulnerable, exploitation of people in their most exploitative moments, their most vulnerable moments, is a really big deal in the law, and it emphasizes it in a pretty literarily unique way. I think the other thing,
which is like,
sorry.
Yeah, well, I was going to say with that example, so that brings in the literary dimension, which maybe where you were going to go there, about trying to discern the logic that's unifying laws that are set side by side, and that itself is instructive.
Yeah, and in another book I talked about, we talked about on OnScript, this idea of pixelation, or the spreading of ideas across, a large corpora of text. And so I think that's a reasonable thing and I think everybody looks at it that way. I'm pretty sure source critical scholars will hate this approach in some ways, because it will, like what I'm suggesting, will cut across the typical sources that are given for any of these collections of laws. And so it is asking to look for unity first, and conceptual unity across laws by looking at how literary devices kind of hyperlink discussions together. Simple ones like eye for an eye, tooth for tooth, which is given in 3 instances, and they're all very different context, every instance that it's given in. But clearly they're meant to be read together just by tugging on that infamous phrase, eye for an eye, tooth for tooth. And there are other ways, conceptually and linguistically, where you get this collection. I call them collections and clusters. And I think it's worth considering the collections, that they're actually trying to do something. It's really wonky to me. And again, this will just be like probably theological preference at this point, where people just say, oh, these laws all conflict with each other. I'm like, well, yeah, if you take a post-Roman statutory approach to a legalist framework, then yeah, of course they do. But let's pretend that we don't know the Romans exist yet. Let's just go back to a period where that's not a thing, and think about how this common law approach might actually provide some different questions that we need to answer by looking across these texts.
Yeah, it reminds me of the way wisdom literature seems to work as well, where, sometimes you get a proverb that will address a topic like wealth. And I talk about this in my class, and I'm teaching on Proverbs. So if you take one proverb on its own, it might seem to convey a particular view of the world of like, you work hard, you get wealthy, or something like that. But then scattered throughout the entire book of Proverbs are all kinds of teaching on wealth that nuance, color, develop your understanding of how you should relate to wealth. And it becomes a very sort of nuanced body of teaching on wisdom teaching on wealth. So, and I know some people have drawn comparisons between common law type teaching like you have in the Torah. This is our custom, this is what has been done in the traditionally, or that kind of thing. And wisdom teachings. Do you see any major differences between wisdom and law then in a biblical sense? Or do you think they're on a spectrum with each other? Or how would you relate the two?
Yeah, I think on a spectrum, certainly. I mean, it's difficult for me now to look at legal reasoning across the Torah and not see it as a wisdom, part of the wisdom tradition. In the same way, the ritual reasoning is also part of the legal tradition, right? I mean, you can separate out ritual from law, but they sure look a lot alike, and they have co-participation in lots of places. And by the time you get to Numbers 5, is it a ritual or is it like a civil statute, right? It's very difficult to tear these things apart. I would make one distinction, at least one distinction, which would be that at least with Proverbs, a great book that explores Proverbs and Deuteronomy as part of a wisdom tradition is Ryan O'Dowd's, I think it's his dissertation, but The Wisdom of Torah, by Van Ruprecht, I can never remember, VNR.
Van den Hocht and Ruprecht.
Yeah, that's right, VNR. But it's a great book, very expensive book, but where he explores the broader wisdom tradition, including Proverbs and Deuteronomy, to show that, like, conceptually and linguistically, often they're doing similar work. What's not happening in a lot of wisdom tradition, well, even Ecclesiastes, if you look at the end of Kohelet, it says, like, look, who knows when it comes to wisdom, understanding the world, maybe, who knows, but what are we left to do his Torah, his instruction, because he's going to judge us one day. And so even that part of the wisdom tradition, may Will Kynes ever rest in peace, that part of
he is still alive.
Let the reader understand. But that part of the wisdom tradition is tipping its hat towards this other thing on the other end of the spectrum, which is you actually need to do something. This is not just pondering something. You actually have to be a particular type of people in the world doing particular types of things, often restraining, living into things and then restraining things for the sake of the vulnerable. And if you don't, God does not judge anybody because they weren't wise enough. He judges them because they were actively practicing atrocity. And so I think that's where I would put at least one break on the continuum and say, you must keep and do these laws, right? This is even Deuteronomy 29:29. The hidden things belong to Yahweh, but the revealed things belong to us to do them. That makes sense.
But I could imagine God judging someone who persists in their folly. So there is a kind of,
there is an edge of judgment on folly. Yeah, I mean, and the lady folly, Dame Folly in Proverbs 7, she leads to death, right? It's a snare to death, and so there is something deadly about folly, which is we really need a new word in English. Because when you talk about foolishness and wisdom in front of undergrads, they're just like, yeah, okay, maybe it would be good to be wise. Maybe I shouldn't be so foolish. I'm like, no, it's deadly, and you take people down with you, right? It's a problem.
Well, and a word like naive, too, which terms get rendered naive in Proverbs, and we think of someone maybe who's sort of blissfully innocent or ignorant, which is in some senses an ideal state, but according to Proverbs, can be deadly and really costly to a community, especially
to a community. And I think that's where, Proverbs is focusing down, and anybody who's had children knows what it's like to be over the shoulder of a child going like, I know these look like the same thing, but you got to trust me. They're two different things and they have very different outcomes versus the training of the community, right? So it's like this, so I think you can, you have a little dialectic between community and individual in the wisdom literature, and you have something similar going on in the law, but the law seems to come in through the community to the individual, though it's always talking to the individual along the way. But it's the hard lines where it's like, yeah, you can't hide yourself from a stray animal just because you know it's you can see the mark of your enemy on its rear or something. You can't hide yourself and let it wander. You actually do need to step up and go rescue that animal. Yeah.
You have an obligation to your enemy.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're at the second segue in our break in our discussion, and all of this talk on Old Testament law leads me to wonder what New Testament perspectives there might be out there for us to learn. And for those of you who listened to the podcast like way back in, 2019.
I was living in Israel then. No. No, it's 2017 because I was
wow.
living in Scotland then, and we
'Cause
went
we-
and we went and visited Israel when this took place.
We used to do our episodes over Skype, and we'd record them.
Maybe you should
we used to
explain what
call-
Skype
we used
is.
to call- we used to call Chris Tilling just randomly, and so we're going to try that now. Chris Tilling, co-host of the podcast as well, and we like to cold call him without any prior warning. So we're going to try that now. We have a slight technical hiccup because I have earbuds in, and so Drew's not going to be able to hear Chris. So we'll just see how this goes. But
Chris
Drew
can't hear me. I can hear him.
Oh, sorry, that's how it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'll be able
Last
to hear
time
Chris.
we got him mid barbecue.
What should we ask him, by the way? So what are some, how might the, I don't know, like what
Believe
are some
it or not,
surprising-
I'm not hosting this episode.
Okay, we'll see what comes to mind. All right, I'm going to hit dial here.
Yeah.
So I need to, hey, Chris? Oh,
I can hear a British woman's voice.
she said it costs 1 cent per minute to call.
I'll refund you.
Hello?
Hey, Chris.
Oh, hang on a minute.
Hey, this
All right.
this is Matt.
Hey, can you hear me all right?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Oh, I can. Matt, how are you doing?
Yeah, doing well. Yeah, good to catch you. Thanks for taking the call.
Hey, no worries at all. I've got Zoom. You can call me there if you prefer.
Oh no, this is good. You're on the podcast right now.
Oh, no. You don't. I was going to say.
I'm here with Dru, who can hear you, but because I have earbuds in, you can't hear him. So we just wanted to have a quick chat. It's been a while.
It has been a while. Way too long.
Last time we did this, you were barbecuing like a big chorizo.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just analysing a chest position at the moment.
Wait, what are you doing?
Nothing useful.
He's analyzing a chess position.
Oh, of course. Yeah, by the way.
In fact,
Yeah.
I'm playing a game against one of our previous guests on the podcast,
No way. Who?
David Artman.
David
And,
Artman. Okay.
Discovered that he's a chess player, and, well, now we're in the middle of a game.
Wow. Okay. Well, we don't want to hold you too long, but Chris, I think this is a good segue then to ask you, I read the intro to Paul Sloan's book, Jesus and the Law of Moses. Dru and I are here talking about biblical law, and Dru wrote a fantastic book, Understanding Biblical Law. And Paul Sloan says that there are, a host of misconceptions about law in the New Testament, like regarding perspectives on law in the New Testament. And what do you think, Chris? What are some common misunderstandings about the law among readers of the New Testament?
Goodness, where to start? I mean, I think in the New Testament world, very often people default to thinking about the law as a religion of legalism. It labels a religion of legalism.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, it's a kind of account of the Jewish relationship with God that we don't want anymore, where the Jew is seen as the paradigmatic mercantile legalist.
Mm-hmm.
You get accepted by God by doing stuff, and that tends to be then seen as the spoil. I mean, this isn't always in academia, right?
Yeah.
Although to a certain extent it was for a long time,
Sure.
but very much at a popular level, where it's then seen as set as a foil against the gospel.
Mm-hmm.
So law then is the way of relating to God wrongly. And now we have been set free from law so that we live under grace. That sort of language, I think, is a common misconception. Of course, it stumbles over a whole bunch of things in the Gospels. And what does it mean when Jesus said that you should, not a jot or tittle should fall from the law, or your righteousness should exceed that of the teachers of the law and the Pharisees? What does all of that mean? And then, of course, in the new perspective on Paul, it really came to a head back in the 70s, and has been worked out over the last 40 years, where that account of the Jew and the Jewish relationship with God has been put under a lot of pressure, and not many would go there anymore.
So what do you think Paul meant when he said, you are not under law, but under grace?
Well, I think one of the things to clarify is his audience. He's speaking not law in general abstract terms in all times and all places, but there is a tendency now to see Paul as he was indeed an apostle to the Gentiles, speaking to Gentile converts who would relate to God not as Jews but as Gentiles, which then meant not under the law in the way that the Jews were. That wasn't to say that then all Jews also had to not practice law or anything like that. So that's one way to see this important language.
Yeah, that's really helpful.
Directed towards Gentiles. But there is a sense as well in which the law became a fundamental part of Paul's ethical teaching. I mean, he speaks of the law of Christ in Galatians, for example, when he gets to all this stuff about living in light of the Spirit. And what does that mean is a matter of debate, but that needs to be brought up. When he's thinking ethically, he's thinking with Torah, with the prophets as well, and informing what he's thinking. And he's obviously rethinking all of that in light of Jesus Christ as well. So it's categorically not just, right, let's forget all that Old Testament stuff.
Right.
And now it's all... So that's one of the ways of understanding Paul's language. But there's a lot of debate over this still, still rumbling.
Yeah. Well, we don't need to get into all the complexities. Dru, anything you want to convey to Chris?
To prepare for this interview, I went and had to reread my own book to see what I said. And we caught Chris in the middle of a chess game, and he gave better answers than I've ever given in any.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I know you can't hear him. He said to prepare for the interview, he had to reread the book, and he felt like catching you in the middle of a chess game, you gave a better answer than he did, which I think you're doing complementary things, but not the same thing. So I don't accept Dru's assessment there, but your mid-chess musings are impressive, Chris.
Oh, that's so good to hear. I mean, I'd love to hear what Dru. I'm looking forward to listening to this episode. I really want to hear what Dru thinks of the book. I haven't ordered it yet. I was going to pick it up at SBL, but I'm really looking forward to
to what he thinks of what Jesus and the Law of Moses.
I'm really looking forward to that one.
Yeah, and you should read Dru's book, Understanding Biblical Law. I think it's really, really fantastic. So I didn't say this, Dru. I think it's like my favorite book of yours now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I like the other ones too, but I just, something, really good.
There you go. I need to get a signed copy.
Yeah. Are you winning the chess game?
I think it's too early to say, but I don't want to put David Artman on the spot, but right now, the next move that he makes is crucial. If he finds the right one, it's pretty even.
Okay.
I think I'm going to hand him his butt. So there we go.
Okay. And what's for dinner, Chris?
I've had dinner already.
Did you grill?
It's all gone. It was I don't even know what you call it. It was the wife's creation, and it was unique.
Okay. Unique. That's like said by a Brit. That seems like a loaded word.
Yeah. Interesting, as the Brits would say.
Yeah. Interesting.
Well, poor Anya. She probably slaved hard.
Well, I think Anya needs to get on to stick up for herself.
Yeah,
to put you in your place.
So she's not even in the same room, so it would be terribly unfair. I won't say any more.
Well, Chris,
I'm looking forward to seeing you guys at SBL. You're both going to be there. Yeah,
are you going to be there, Dru? Yeah, Dru will be there. Yep.
Excellent, fantastic.
Okay, well, thanks for taking the time to talk, Chris. We appreciate it.
Good to chat, guys. Take care.
All right, bye.
Bye.
We should let the listener understand that these we have not. I haven't talked to him in months or since SBL. I don't think you have. Have you?
There was no, not since SBL.
Yeah. So these are real. These are real on the spot moments. Yeah.
Yeah. All I did was I emailed him and I said, Chris, can we have a quick chat? Nothing bad, because I do like to tell people that. Okay, Dru, back to your book. There's a trend in biblical studies, I think, around, especially in scholarship, that has a kind of aversion to highlighting the uniqueness of the Hebrew Bible, Old Testament. And so, when it comes to the law, there are law collections in the ancient Near East. A lot of parallels have been drawn between them. And it's not that scholars don't note differences and things like that, but you don't seem afraid of highlighting the uniqueness of biblical law, which I really appreciated. This conviction that something really special is going on here. Of course, you don't take it out of that world. Would you say are some of the differences that stand out to you as you're thinking about biblical law compared to some of the parallels in the ancient Near East?
Yeah, I think I actually have a similar aversion to the kind of apologetic approach to celebrating the uniquenesses and say it's radically different, it's nothing like it in the ancient world. And I think if you look at a collection of genetic markers of what's going on in the Hebrew Bible, you could probably make a claim like it really is different on a lot of, when you put all the different fronts together. But on any one front, like, the legal reasoning, that aversion, I mean, I don't think it's just me. I think you'll find a lot of scholars that will point out, okay, yeah, they are taking very standard ancient Near Eastern common law legal tropes and playing with them in certain ways and turning them, and sometimes turning them on their heads. One obvious one would be, eye for an eye, tooth for tooth, where it is lex talionis. It really is a law of retribution. In the Code of Hammurabi, of course, it shows up in variation, I think in Lipit Ishtar, if I remember correctly. But the Code of Hammurabi is the most infamous version of this, where it's a class-based system, right? So if you're a nobleman or whatever an Ewilu is, if you strike downward in the class status or strata, you can pay a small fine. But if somebody strikes upward, if a slave strikes a nobleman, then it's off with their arm, right, or off with their hand. Interestingly, it is a law that is meant to include parity in some ideal level. Yet at the same time, it's completely stratified by the class system. Whatever that class, I think it's still unclear what exactly the class system, how it functioned in Babylon. But there's certainly something like that going on. So when you have eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, the first iteration in Exodus, as part of the initial set of laws coming across, it's set in the story where they've just come out of Egypt, and it's basically like here's what you need to know. It goes the opposite direction. It actually says eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. And if you strike the eye of your slave, then you have to release them. If you strike the tooth of your slave, then you have to release them. And it becomes very clear, the eye for an eye, tooth for tooth is a legal principle, which I talk about a lot in the book. And the concrete instances are actually what determines what the principle can mean. It shapes the principle, because principles can go in a lot of different directions. And so it constrains the meaning of the principle, and it constrains it down to protecting the bodies of slaves. I don't care how you slice it. That's pretty surprising if you're in the ancient world. And you could ask all kinds of questions like, well, why would you protect the body of the slave? Why would anybody ever be compelled to do that? Is there some perverse incentive baked in elsewhere? And I think when you look across the slave laws, and I would say including the foreign slaves, the war slaves, that you really do have this general sense of you cannot treat these people however you want. You cannot steal them. You cannot sell people. You can't. That's not the game we're playing here. But there certainly is regulation on the sale of somebody's labor in a slave relationship, or obviously a war slave. You have a whole different set of restrictions that kick into place. So I think there's some ways in which you can see, a friend of mine, Jerry Unterman, is a Jewish Israeli scholar that I value his views and opinions very deeply. And he also has an aversion to basically apologetically claiming the uniqueness. But there are spots where it's just so different from what's going on in the thinking of the world around them. And at the same time, it is of a piece of the ancient Near Eastern legal tradition. So they're using similar ways of thinking about even protection of the weak. I mean, every legal code starts with some ruler who is there to establish justice and righteousness in the land and protect the weak, right? That's at the beginning of Hammurabi too, right? And then it goes on to say, but if you're weak and you strike somebody who is upper level, then so be it for you, all the worse for you. So I feel like there's a less of that kind of obvious contradictory information going on between the statute in Scripture and the principles that are shaping them.
And another one that you note is, which is another glaring difference, is the embeddedness of law in narrative.
Oh yeah.
So you don't really have anything fully equivalent to that in the ancient Near East, let alone just the extended body of literature that you have in the Old Testament anyhow. But what's the impact of setting collections of laws in a broader narrative? Like how should that impact our legal thinking?
Yeah, and again, if you're taking the lens of there might be some kind of conceptual unity here that's meant to be taught, like if you think these are all completely different pieces of literature, then this may not work. But when you have laws, at certain points, it becomes clear that certain laws are looking at a particular situation and saying, don't be like them. And I say it becomes clear. I think you have to make the argument. But the classic one that I refer to several times in the book is Leviticus 18, where you're not supposed to have sexual relations with close relatives. And then you have to work out, well, what exactly is a close relative? Because apparently that was a concern. And it becomes kind of like a don't drink this shampoo, where, when your kids say, why does it say don't drink it? Why would anybody drink it? And you're like, well, probably somebody at some point drank it and then sued, the shampoo company. And you get things that look like that in the law. So when in Leviticus 18, when they start working through, first things first is you realize, oh, Genesis seems to have a lot of these things that are strictly forbidden in Leviticus 18. I can put names next to them of people who are doing this, and God never comes in and says, don't do that, right? It's just kind of given as a description without any kind of moral narration on it. And by the time you get to the end of that list, you could certainly see Judah would be on the list, Abraham would be on the list, Reuben would be on the list of things that, that they shouldn't be doing, or relatives they should not be having a sexual relationship with. At the end, you get to do not take a sister as a rival wife to a sister while she's still alive. And you're like, okay, that sounds like Jacob. And
why don't you just say his name?
Yeah, exactly. Rachel and Leah seem to be in. And so what happens then is, again, it seems to be pointing in the direction of that narrative. So it almost becomes don't do this. And if you ask, well, why not take a sister as a rival wife? Well, go read about 17 chapters in Genesis, and you'll see the kinds of things that spill out. Right, yeah. Which builds your illegal imagination. I mean, and anybody who's had kids who's had to talk to them about various laws, and they're like, wait, why can't you, embezzle a little money out of the cash drawer? What's the problem there? And you have to walk through, and you realize they don't have a legal imagination. My daughter was driving in what we call the suicide lane. That's probably a bad term for it, but it's that kind of middle turn lane where either side can go into that lane and turn. In the middle, and she was just driving down it, just full speed at the speed limit. And I was like, oh, sweetie, you can't drive in this lane. You need to get over. And she was like, why? Because she didn't have an imagination of the various.
Because you can drive in it.
Yeah, that's true. I was practically wrong on the issue because functionally she was driving in it. And then I explained to her the various things that could arise. And I said, oh, well, there's a lot of head-on collisions in this lane. Why? Well, it's because people get into this lane, they drive too fast, too far, and then they can't stop. So I feel like a lot of the narration that's going on in which this is embedded, you're getting case studies and examples of, in case you don't understand what's wrong with this, let me point to exhibit A, B, and C. Not every single one, but there's some that I think are more obvious than other ones.
Yeah, I love those reflections on narrative and law, because I think that's such a part of maybe even the impetus behind some of the narratives that are included in the Pentateuch and beyond. I'm thinking of the book of Joshua and where I've focused a little more in this respect of the Rahab narrative and the way that she is an instance of reflecting on the laws regarding the destruction of the Canaanites in Deuteronomy 7, and here you meet a Canaanite. And it's almost as if you're to do what Joshua 1 says, which is meditate on the Torah.
Right.
Now, here's your first case study. What about Rahab?
Oh, that's a great example.
And I think a flat reading would say, well, the law says wipe her out, but they chose mercy over law, or something like that, right? And I think this is in a book that says meditate on the law, and it wants you to think with the law about the case of Rahab. And I think in the end, not see her inclusion in Israel as an abrogation of the law or an undermining of it, but as somehow embodying the law's vision.
Yeah. And I think one of the examples I give in the book, if I remember correctly, is Abraham in Genesis 18, and then Abimelech later, I think in Genesis 21, if I remember correctly. It's the question is, will God judge unfavorably the righteous right alongside the wicked? If the righteous are mixed in with the wicked, will he judge them the same? And clearly God says no in both occasions. And then as you get into the actual legal reasoning of the Torah, it's very careful about separating out and processes and mechanisms from kind of sorting out the righteous from the wicked, and even what we would call today due process to people. That might even mean they get away with murder. Like it could be the case that they pull it off because the due process allows them, because it defaults on the conservative side of, well, if you can't show it, and if there's not people willing to stake their own lives to be witnesses in order to do this, then we're just going to, that God's going to judge it all in the end. So, that kind of like master judgment card gets pulled kind of early and often in the law. A lot is left to God.
Yeah, I thought you drew that out at various points about how it errs toward avoiding the mistake of wrongly accusing or judging someone.
Yeah, which is crazy, because that is certainly not how I used to think about the law. And I think if I say biblical justice in a room full of Christians, they would typically think of it the exact opposite way, as like harsher, over punishing. Yeah.
Right. Well, that brings me to one of my questions is that you take issue with the idea that one of your myths, in fact, is that biblical law is oriented toward punishment, and those punishments are excessively harsh. And you could see how someone on a quick reading of that of the law could come away with that conclusion, because there's the death penalty for rebellious children, blasphemy, adultery, etc. How is that not harsh by modern standards?
Well, modern who, when, where, right? Like, so if you're talking about like Denmark standards today, then that probably is harsh.
All right, let's go with the U.S.
The U.S., it's fairly easy. And this actually came from, I had a student who flippantly said in class once, like, well, oh yeah, you die for everything in the Old Testament. They can kill you for anything in the Old Testament. And on the spot, because I knew the student, I was just like, all right, name them. Name all the things you can die for, right? That have capital punishment. And then we said, okay, there's classes of crimes that fit in. And I remember going home that night and looking up U.S. statute, federal statute, state statutes, like all the things you can die for. And I list them in the book. A surprising number. I mean, if we're talking in the 1970s, the list would be almost a third longer. So it turns out that you can actually get executed in the United States for many more things than you can in the Bible, if you talk about categories of crime.
Yeah. Let me list a few of them that you mentioned. Treason, sex with a minor, aggravated kidnapping, drug trafficking, aircraft hijacking, placing a bomb near a bus terminal.
Again, that has to have there has to be a narrative associated with that.
There's a story there. Bus terminals specifically.
Right.
Trafficking large quantities of drugs, attempting or authorizing killing of an officer, juror, or witness, and of course, murder. So those are just some of the ones that you list there.
Well, an interesting one too, where it really does kind of push you all the way down the dark train of like, when do you execute somebody if you're in a society that does that? If you murder somebody in prison, and I taught in prison, a prison program last year, an undergraduate prison program, and there were the very frank conversations. I mean, I had convicted murderers in the class. Half my class were lifers who were never getting out of prison. There is this thought: if you don't have capital punishment as the punishment for murder in prison, it would be haywire. Because you really have, if they're already in prison, like how do you incentivize them not to kill people in prison? And so it really is kind of the last road of justice in that situation. And I'm not going to for a second pretend like the idea that you could bring your son to the elders and decide to like execute them publicly, like that's a simple example of like, oh no, they're violent just like we are. I mean, I don't think anybody would do that today. I'm not sure anybody would have done that in ancient Israel either. It's very difficult to imagine the kind of situation where that could possibly happen. But they give it as an example of something that could happen, like this, maybe an extreme example. Certainly sexual crimes, we think very differently about sexuality today as a culture, and so it would be very difficult. By the way, they're not asking non-Hebrews outside of the Iron Age who aren't under the theocracy of Israel. They're not asking other people to do these things, right? They're saying in this particular setting. But I do think that we probably don't think enough about, I think we dream a little bit dreamily about a world in which there is no violence done by anybody, and therefore we don't have to do violence to anybody. And there's really active questions about how do you use violence in a modern society where people are going to do these things no matter what, and people who are just not going. The prison. I'm probably more on the dreamy side, and my prisoners kind of woke me up, and they're like, no, there's some people who need to be in here for life. There's some people that need to be executed. They should be executed. Wow. These are Christian men who are mature and thinking very carefully about it, but they're just like, no, like you don't know. There are really dangerous people, and not that that's the right answer, but I think there is this the chronological snobbery, but it's something more than it's moral high horsing. That we get on. Even when I teach Joshua, like you, I talk about drone strikes and, the firebombing, the napalming of Tokyo, and like, hey, we have justified a lot of murder for war, right? Because we thought it was worth it. And so I think there is a sense where when you live in a world where there's no prisons, there's no incarceration in this system of justice, there is no way to restrain somebody basically permanently for a long time.
Yeah, you point out they have no prisons.
Yeah, how do you practically deal with somebody who is incorrigible for whatever reason? Like, you don't always know why people are acting this way. The son, it's not just because they're an unruly son. When you read across the cluster of that teaching, they're a glutton and a drunkard, right? And which means they are eating down the stash. They are cutting into your food supply. And they actually become a dangerous person to the community. And I will just say this to all of our OnScript listeners. If you've never met a person like this in real life, A, you should thank God, but B, like maybe you should ask around to law enforcement, get to know some law enforcement officers or get to know some people who have been around out on the streets. These people absolutely do exist. And so I think we're just not dealing with the question of what do we do with people. Well, now we can just say we'll throw them in prison and never look at them again. And then we don't think about them. We don't visit them in prison. And it becomes, in some ways, an equally deleterious act, I guess. Sorry, you got me monologuing on the violence issue.
To quote The Incredibles.
Yes.
You mentioned moral high horsing. I think there's also just cultural ignorance too about a rebellious son specifically. So, first of all, huge incentive not to ever bring them forward for execution because
right.
That's the one who's going to be farming your land, taking care of you in your old age, all that stuff. But it's very likely that in addition to eating down the food stores and so on, due to their drunkenness and gluttonousness, they're also maybe neglecting the obligation to care for parents.
Right.
And which is a death sentence for the parents. And so there are matters of life and death at play in this, and not just a kid who's out of control and won't sit still in church. That's not what's in view here, or who keeps getting sent to the principal's office.
Well, and I think we think of it in the sense of everybody's got, someone who is struggling deeply with an addiction somewhere in their family. It's not unusual. And they have broken all their relationships, burned all their bridges. And I think that's what we're picturing often. And I don't think that's what they're referring to. I mean, that may be part of what they're referring to, but that's not the danger that's being considered there. I think I gave an example of the space station in there.
Oh, yeah, that was good. Can you share that one with listeners? I thought that was helpful.
I thought that was brilliant, too. I woke up in the morning.
If you do say so yourself.
Yeah, no, it wasn't me. I woke up in the morning, I think, higher powers gave me that. I was like, oh, that's a really good example. Or maybe someone gave it to me. But if you have an astronaut who just, for whatever reason, they go rogue on the space station, and just decide they're going to like start loosening bolts and, eating all the food that you've supposed to last you 6 months, and nobody can come for 6 months. It takes that long to get a rocket up there, to do anything. And you restrain him, but he gets out because, space stations presumably don't have jails in them, or I don't know, maybe they do. I bet they've thought through this contingency, but at some point, like
if things like back when it was collaboration, if things between the Russians, and the Americans got a little bit contentious.
Yeah, they have like a checklist all in Russian. Like, what is that? Oh, nothing. It's just how to imprison your American comrades. But yeah, there at some point there is going to be, like, if they are incorrigible and they're hell bent for whatever reason, they're having a mental break or something like that. Like at some point, you're going to put them out the airlock and just send them on their way, right? And nobody would blame you for doing that. They would see it as a regrettable thing and something they wish they could have avoided. But I think as modern Americans, it's very difficult for us to summon up any situation like that could ever happen to us. And that was, I think, more on the minds of ancient Israelites.
And I think this is another case where law and narrative is really important to read together, because you have narratives that show cases where maybe someone could have been executed but wasn't. Right. And I think that's part of the legal reasoning through narrative that you talk about in the book, where, I mean, you could go back to the Cain and Abel story where God permits Cain to wander and puts a mark of protection on him. Or the woman who comes before David with the parable about the two sons, which is really like a replay of Cain and Abel, and says, hey, my one son killed the other, and now he's going to be executed, but he's the only one who can provide for me.
Right.
And she's in this, it turns out to be a fictitious scenario. David says, she should be this son should be granted protection. So, and I think those are little windows into some of the process of how these things were actually worked out. And if we just take the law of execution on its own, we might think, oh, this is how things normally went. Like parents are constantly dragging their kids out, when they're out of control. And
right. Let's admit, though, it would be a great back pocket thing as a parent today.
Yeah, having
don't make me take you down to the elders. But yeah, I think we imagine it's Alice in Wonderland, off with their heads, off with their heads, off with their, everything is solved with, capital punishment. And it just doesn't look that way at all. Yeah.
We're at the third interlude in our interview. And so I just have a few more speed round questions for you. Okay. You have to choose one of the following two options. You have to teach out the year painting your face like the lead singer of Kiss, or you have to wear and again, no explanation. You can't say it's because I had to. Or wear a goat hair garment for the rest of the year. Let's say the academic year.
I will say absolutely the painted face. Can I give a reason?
Yeah.
Both of them make me slightly nauseous because I think of how much you would sweat in them. Because, that makeup, it actually it clogs the pores or whatever. So, but I would go with painted face just to mess with students. Because they wouldn't know who it was. They would just be scared. They would probably think I was demonic or something. So,
what's the most significant book in biblical studies in the last 50 years?
Last 50 years. Whatever the last book you wrote, that's probably going to be my, that's probably my answer.
All right.
I think your Cambridge book on the rhetoric of violence, it was for me, that was a game changer. Didn't get enough attention.
Well, it's going to be made into a movie, I'm sure, at some point, which leads me to my next question.
Yeah.
What's your favorite recent movie?
Recent movie. What have I even seen recently?
All right, it doesn't have to be recent. You can go back.
I'm drawing a blank about what I've seen recently. I'll get off a flight after having watched 5 movies, and then my wife will be like, "What movies did you watch?" I'm like, I don't remember any of the 5." Oh, well, one movie that I really liked, it won the Academy Award, the Korean movie where they are parasites. I don't know if you've ever seen Parasite.
No, I haven't seen it.
I haven't seen it recently, but I remember thinking, this is just one of the most thoroughly enjoyable movies on so many different levels I have seen ever. So
nice. All right, who's the most Christian famous person you've met?
I mean, Tom Wright and we're supposed to be sharing an office at Wycliffe, so because he's never there.
Who's the most Christian infamous person you've met?
Ooh. Well, I can't say.
Okay.
It's hey,
that's okay.
I was trying to like veil the answer, but I can't even like veil it. So
okay, that's all I have for the second speed round. Just a few final questions here. What are some of the implications that as you pan out from what you've done in this book, much of which we haven't touched on, for Christians' understanding of and engagement with the law? Like, what would you want to commend to readers and to Christians as they engage?
Yeah. Oh, well, the book is supposed to be a short book, and it was. And the goal was really to help people read the law better rather than worse. I mean, that was really the low hurdle goal, and it was based on a book, another book that I read that kind of had the same goal for college level writing. It's like, hey, we're not going to make people into expert law readers. And the publisher said, a lot of people have started writing a short book on law and they end up being 400 and 500 pages. So like actually keep it short, which meant I had to axe a lot of things, but I think it was better for that. And so I think that kind of people read the law and they just get into it and they're just like, it's talked about slaves. I can't do this. Or, it's talking about weird sex stuff. And so to give people real inroads in and help them see the kind of the restraint and the protection that's baked into a lot of the legal thinking, that the law, it's one of the verses of O Holy Night, his law is love, is a line in there, which I thought, well, that's a brilliant line in a Christmas song of all things. You wouldn't, and you should stop and think like, wait, who writing a Christmas song ever thought God's law is love? And I think that is actually true, and that's kind of a unifying, and as you start reading it better rather than worse, because nobody reads it right versus wrong, that a picture emerges slowly, which actually allows you to see why this is something that would make a man happy, according to Psalm 1, or delight, why this would be showing God's love. And, if for no other reason, it's like a liberal arts thing, like entering another perspective of the world. The interesting thing is, like, Jesus doesn't back away, as Chris said. Jesus like doubles down on all of this, and the early church then had to choose specifically which parts had to continue and which practices could be open to the Gentile or off the Gentiles, off their path in practicing Christianity. And so I think if you want to understand the Pharisees, if you want to understand the Gospels, what Jesus is talking about, you really have to understand the law, or half the things he says just don't make any sense. Maybe not that much, but a lot of the things he says don't make any sense. So the goal is just to get everybody on the page and thinking better rather than worse. And if that's all that happens by the time somebody gets to the end of the book, I have exercises and, hope people use it in classrooms and hope it's useful. But that's the low win.
Well, Dru, I think you've succeeded in that, certainly have for me. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk about your work, and I commend it to our listeners, Understanding Biblical Law by Dru Johnson. Thanks.
Thanks, Matt.
You've been listening to OnScript, delectable conversations on scripture and theology. If this episode has brought you inner peace or lit your biblical fire, please consider a small donation of just $2 or $5 per month. Information on how to donate can be found at onscript.study/donate.